Think about the last time someone made you feel guilty for something that, deep down, you knew wasn't actually your fault. Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you simply said no. And somehow, within minutes, you were the one apologizing, comforting them, trying to fix a feeling you never actually caused. If that's happened to you, you already know how disorienting it feels. You walked into the conversation certain of yourself and walked out questioning everything. That shift, that quiet transfer of guilt from them to you, is not accidental. It's one of the most common tools in emotional manipulation, and almost nobody is taught how it actually works. Here's what most people never realize. Emotional manipulation rarely announces itself. It doesn't look like control. It looks like concern, like hurt, like disappointment, which is exactly why it's so effective. You're not defending yourself against an obvious attack. You're defending yourself against someone else's pain, real or performed. And that instinct to soothe pain in another person runs so deep that most people override their own judgment to do it. This connects to something called reciprocity, a deeply wired social instinct that tells us if someone gives us something, even something emotional, we owe them something back. Manipulators, whether consciously or not, often exploit this. They offer their hurt feelings, their disappointment, their silence, and your nervous system responds as though a debt has been created. You start looking for a way to repay it, usually by giving up whatever boundary triggered the reaction in the first place. And it gets even more interesting than that, because there's a deeper layer happening underneath. Manipulation often works through something psychologists describe as emotional outsourcing, where one person makes their internal state your responsibility to manage. Their frustration becomes a problem you need to solve. Their sadness becomes something only your compliance can fix. Once you accept that framing, even briefly, you've handed over control of your own decisions to someone else's emotional weather. This is where almost everyone makes the same mistake. They try to end the manipulation by explaining themselves more clearly, more context, more reassurance, more proof that their intentions were good. But manipulation was never actually about misunderstanding. Explaining yourself to someone who benefits from your guilt doesn't resolve the dynamic. It feeds it, because now they know explanation is available to them every time they apply pressure. So how does emotional manipulation actually end? Not through better arguments, not through more patience. It ends through 3 specific shifts almost nobody is shown. The first is recognizing the difference between someone's feelings and your responsibility for them. This sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest distinctions to hold on to in the moment. Someone can genuinely feel hurt, disappointed, even devastated, without that feeling being evidence that you did something wrong. This taps into emotional regulation, the ability to acknowledge another person's emotional state without absorbing it as your own obligation to fix. You can say, calmly, "I understand you're upset," without following it with an apology for something that wasn't actually a mistake. The second is refusing to negotiate a boundary once it's stated. Manipulation often escalates the moment a boundary is set, not because the person misunderstood it, but because they're testing whether it's real. This is where psychological reactance comes in, on their side, not yours. The instinct is to push back harder against a limit that threatens their usual access to control. The people who successfully end these patterns don't re-explain the boundary 5 different ways hoping for agreement. They simply repeat it, plainly, without escalating their tone to match the pressure being applied. Sameness in this case becomes strength. The third, and often the most difficult, is tolerating the discomfort of being disliked in the moment. Manipulation thrives on your need for immediate approval. It relies on the assumption that you'll choose short-term peace over long-term self-respect every time, because conflict feels worse than compliance. But this is exactly where status dynamics quietly shift. The first time you stay calm, hold your position, and allow someone to be upset without rushing to fix it, something changes in the relationship. You're no longer the predictable variable. And manipulation depends almost entirely on predictability. There's also something worth understanding about why certain people rely on this pattern so heavily. Often it connects to narcissistic supply, a need not just to be agreed with, but to feel a sense of control over how others respond to them emotionally. For someone operating from that place, your calm, steady boundary isn't just inconvenient. It's threatening because it removes their ability to regulate your behavior through your emotions. Which is exactly why the discomfort you feel in that moment isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's usually a sign the pattern is finally breaking. Ending emotional manipulation was never about winning an argument, or proving your intentions, or getting the other person to finally understand. It was always about something quieter and much harder, refusing to let someone else's emotional reaction override your own judgment about what's true, fair, and necessary. The moment you stop needing someone's approval to feel confident in your own decision, the manipulation loses its most essential fuel. True power